Welcome everyone. I declare this meeting of the Planning Committee for the Port Phillip City Council open, and I welcome the members of the public who are here tonight. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the Yalukit Willem clan of the Boonwurrung. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present. We acknowledge and uphold their continuing relationship to this land. Council has a local law that determines how this meeting will be conducted. There is a time allotted in tonight's agenda for public question time. During public question time, members of the public can ask specific questions on planning matters other than those relating to a topic that's already on the agenda for tonight. There is also an opportunity for members of the public to ask a question and or make a comment on a specific item on tonight's agenda. This will be done prior to the committee considering the item. If you wish to ask a question or speak to a report, please complete the blue form that is available at the table just outside the chamber and hand it to a staff member. I encourage you to try to limit your questions and comments to around 3 minutes and to try to avoid repeating any points that have been previously made by other speakers. Please note that this committee can only address questions and deal with items within its delegation, that is, planning matters. The decisions of this committee are final and can be acted upon. Please note that all planning committee meetings are now being live streamed. Live streaming and recording allows the community to watch and listen to meetings in real time, providing greater access to council decision making and debate, and improving openness and transparency. The live stream of this meeting is available on Council's website, and the recording of this meeting will also be available to view a few days after the meeting on Council's website and YouTube channel. The cameras will film and record councillors at this meeting. However, care is taken not to film or record images of members of the public. If a member of the public asks a question or makes a comment about an agenda item, they will not be filmed, but their voice will be heard in the live stream and recorded. Please also note, in accordance with Council's local law, that this meeting cannot be filmed or audio taped unless permission is granted by the Chair. In the unlikely event of an emergency evacuation, please follow the instructions of the Chief Warden. So, we'll move on to the agenda. Item 1 is apologies. So, councillors, do we have any apologies? Councillor Voss.
Apologies from Councillor Simic and Councillor Brand.
Thank you, Councillor Voss. So, do I have a mover to accept those apologies? Councillor Pearl, and seconded Councillor Crawford. Oh, did you? Sorry, that's a good point. The mover would be Councillor Voss and the seconder would be Councillor Pearl. I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item number 2 on the agenda, minutes of previous meetings. So the minutes of the Planning Committee, they've been circulated, held on the 25th of July 2018, have been circulated. Does anyone have any questions regarding these minutes? If not, can I have a motion to confirm these minutes? Councillor Voss to move, Councillor Copsey to second. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Yep. Should remember to vote myself. Item number 3, declarations of conflicts of interest. So does any councillor have a conflict of interest in a matter being discussed at tonight's meeting? I'll take that as a no. Moving right along to item number 4, public question time. So I don't believe we have any members of the public who wish to ask any questions in public question time. So if that's the case, I'll move along to item number 5, councillor question time. Councillors, are there any questions for the officers? No, it looks like none of those are. We're ripping right through this. So moving on then to item number 6, presentation of reports. So we've got item 6.1, 171 to 183 Ferrars Street, Southbank. And councillors, I believe we have a representative of the applicant here who's either going to speak or is just here to answer questions. I'm not sure. Mr. Maitland, are you happy to speak or? Yep, okay, no. Mr. Maitland, can you please approach the, and sit in the chair, turn on the microphone, state your name and suburb, and then speak to the application.
Josh Maitland, and I live in South Yarra. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak in support of the application. I'm standing in for a colleague of mine, Tony Christafi, who's the applicant for the amendment. I do have a really brief summary I'm going to read through, but I'm happy to answer questions at the end. So basically the amendment before us today, summary of it is the deletion of conditions relating to the no longer required pedestrian bridge, creation of affordable housing unit, an increased number of 3-bedroom apartments with a reduction of 1 and 2-bedroom apartments, provision of office space at the first floor level, and minor alterations to the exterior design, podium, materials and finishes. We're also seeking the endorsement of plans. We believe the proposal is highly resolved and will provide a positive contribution to the Montague precinct, provides an improved standard of internal amenity for apartments, and we think it's a much better mix of apartment sizes, particularly with the amount of family-sized units. We believe the amended plans we have tendered respond to all urban design concerns raised by the Port Phillip urban design officers. We've also reviewed the officer's recommendation in the agenda, and we're broadly supportive of all recommended changes, and importantly we support council joining as a party to the VCAT proceeding. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I understand there might be some around the loading zone, or a loading zone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maitland. So, councillors, do we have any questions for the officers or for the applicant's representative? Councillor Voss.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Maitland. I'd just like to clarify, we had a bit of a discussion today around how a resident will unload their truck to move into their apartment without going up and down any stairs to get to the lift. Is there an easy way for someone to do that?
So our thoughts were there's some room, I think it's noted in the plans, it's notated as the waste collection and removal area for the truck. We believe there's enough room for loading to be undertaken there. There may be, as was suggested just earlier to myself, there may be some room to the north of where the car lifts are. We're happy for a notation to be put on the plans to that effect of a loading zone there. The client takes no issue with that. I believe there still will be a couple of stairs to take the furniture up there.
I guess, in practice, it's very difficult if you have to negotiate stairs with a couch or a fridge, and then to try and get through a small door to get into a lift right next door. So we're just wanting to make sure that it's actually practical and a sensible solution. And just wondering, so you've just said that the applicant would be happy to make some modifications to make sure that that occurs?
We take no issue with notations on the plan. I guess in practice, I would have thought anything that would fit in the car, a resident would be likely to take it up in the car lift. I know I'd probably do that if I lived in one of these apartments. But I guess for larger furniture it'd be delivered in a truck and there wouldn't be that option.
Thank you, Mr. Maitland. So just to confirm, that you've said that so the space that's in the northeast corner that's closer to where the lift is, you've said that the applicant would have no problem with adding an annotation that said that would be suitable for trucks to use.
So we're happy to add an annotation. I guess we'd need to speak to our traffic engineers whether or not that would still work with the swept path, so I think it probably will. So there's quite a bit of room there. We'd have to confirm that, but we're happy to take it on notice.
Councillor Voss.
Can you please confirm which set of plans you are looking at the moment?
Yeah, no problem. So these are the informally submitted. They haven't been formally submitted to the department.
So the August plans? Or sorry, the June plans? The June plans, 2018, or?
Yes, 22nd of June, revised plans.
Do you have more to ask, Councillor Voss?
Yes, the truck, the size of the truck. Is that an average size
for a waste,
removalist
the
truck?
waste collection truck?
No, for a removalist. That will fit into that area. Will an average size removalist truck fit into that area? And maybe that's a question I need to ask the officers, but
so
6.4 metres.
Not being a traffic engineer or an expert in the matter, I can't guarantee that. would have thought dealing with issues like this quite often, that's a fairly large amount of space compared to what we usually have to work with. So I would have thought there's enough room, but I can't guarantee that.
Councillor Voss, did you want to direct that to the officers as well? Or?
I'll take that up with the officers when we get to do that. Yep, thanks.
Well, now is the time to ask officer questions.
Can I just ask the applicant one more question?
Absolutely,
please,
yeah.
Chair. Just want to clarify that Railway Place will be a combined pedestrian and sort of very slow car. Is the applicant aware of that? And what expectations do you have around that space?
I believe so. I mean, it's quite obvious when you're out on the site that it is a laneway. It's a constrained environment. There is quite a bit happening there. We would acknowledge that we do have vehicle access from Railway Place. I believe in the draft provisions for Fisherman's Bend, it restricts us from having vehicle access on Ferrars Street, so it was our only option. Yeah, I'm not too sure what more to say.
Councillor Voss.
Told you I was going to ask lots of questions. The affordable housing provision, I've got to say thank you for that. I think that's something that we recognise as a council that's really needed. So just want to clarify that's one bedroom. Is there any opportunity for any other affordable housing in the block?
I haven't discussed that with the client. When the application was first made and the permit was granted, there was no requirement for affordable housing. Hence, there was no affordable housing component in the original proposal. It can be a difficult thing to retrofit, not physically because they're apartments, but to make the costings work with an application when you have an existing permit and you're looking to amend it. I haven't discussed with the client whether they, what their intentions were with more affordable housing or whether that had been considered. That was something that was negotiated directly with the department for the removal of the pedestrian bridge, even though it was no longer required anyway. The cost of the affordable housing unit, I believe, is $400,000. The costing for the bridge was roughly $260,000, I think. So it is over and above the public benefit that they were providing. But as I said, I haven't discussed that with the applicant. Or with the client, sorry.
Councillor Voss, do you have more questions? Okay. Do any other councillors have any other questions for the applicant? If not, then thank you, Mr. Maitland. I'll let you take your seat again, and then we'll go to if there's any questions for the officers. Yes, Councillor Crawford.
So, following up on what Councillor Voss, or Mayor Voss, was discussing, do we need to, given the willingness of Mr. Maitland, have conditions around ensuring that there are perhaps options where, I don't know, there's a ramp instead of stairs, or that we ensure that the swept path, the other entrance to the north, will allow parking while still allowing cars into the car lift? Like, what do we need to do in that regard to ensure that that actually happens in the building?
Mr. Gutteridge.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The circumstance here is that we're dealing with a Section 72 amendment to an existing permit, and the existing permit includes a waiver of the loading bay, and the planning scheme, since that application was first lodged, has been amended to take out the requirement for a loading bay. So there is no legislative ability for us to ask for or include a condition requiring a loading bay in this development. That said, the space to the south of the two car lifts has a depth of in the order of 7 to 8 metres, and that is sufficient to accommodate a standard rigid truck, and that includes a waste collection vehicle, which come in the order of about 6.4 metres length. The space to the north of the two car lifts is in the order of 13.2 metres, thank you, and is sufficient to accommodate an 8 metre wide, long truck, which is a larger vehicle, includes very large removal vans and the like. So those dimensions in league with the undertaking from the applicant to have a willingness to include notations on future plans that might be substituted for the VCAT hearing would provide a large measure of what Council is seeking. And additionally, we have spoken with our traffic engineers this afternoon to follow up queries that were raised in this morning's briefing, and they confirm that advice as well, that those spaces are sufficient to accommodate both waste vehicles and removal vans.
Councillor Crawford.
Just to follow up on that, Mr Guttridge, so although we can't condition the loading zones or loading spaces, in terms of giving two options for residents to move in, can we look at maybe is it just further discussion with the applicant around maybe a ramp instead of stairs, or, you know, little things like that? Is that what we would do to try and make it maximise the way that people can move in?
Mr Guttridge.
Here we are. Okay. For you, Mr Chair, this matter is listed for a VCAT hearing. I'm just searching for some dates for you, including a practice day hearing at the end of next week, which the applicants have indicated they will not oppose Council being joined as the party, and that is followed up on the 11th of October by a compulsory conference for a mediation. At a mediation, there is quite a lot of scope to negotiate matters, sometimes matters which are outside of the ordinary realm of town planning. So that is something which the officers or Council's representative at that hearing could certainly raise, and the applicants will now be aware of that as well.
Councillor Voss.
Through you, Chair, I'd like to ask which condition is it around the removalist item in the conditions? What number is it?
Mr Ball.
Through you, Mr Chairman, there are no conditions in relation to it. The permit as existed had a waiver of the loading bay requirements. This is a Section 72 amendment. The Section 72 amendment doesn't allow us to revisit issues that are already resolved, issued by the permit. Essentially, you know, the discussion is we don't get a second bite at the cherry in relation to it. However, what we've heard from the applicant today is that they're prepared to provide the same opportunity in the northeast corner, to provide an opportunity for another option for vehicles to load and unload, essentially have removal trucks provided at that north end. As Mr Guttridge has indicated, that we can also discuss and negotiate this at the compulsory conference to confirm.
Mr Borg, I'm quite keen to capture that in tonight's decision. So is there something you can do to help us with that?
It is beyond our power to do that, Madam Mayor. So but it is an undertaking that we have heard from the applicant, and I'm pretty confident that they will follow through with that. Again, we'll have the opportunity at compulsory conference to raise that matter.
Mr Borg, the plans have varied in that area over the last three. I'm just wondering, have they varied? I thought they had. So how can they vary?
Okay. So
and for us not to be able to have any ability to...
The plans have not been, as part of the original permit, have not been endorsed. What has been provided and is available in the package that councillors have seen that is on the agenda. One is a comparison plan, so what was initially proposed essentially and what's being offered. The second one is a Section 72 plans, which forms part of the amendment request. The last set of plans is a revision of some of those concerns. The applicants have spoken to officers and also spoken to council's other service areas, such as urban design, etc. So they've provided a set of discussion plans to review as well that they're prepared to offer up at the compulsory conference, essentially, because the matter is going to VCAT. So that's where the plans have evolved in that situation.
Do councillors have any further questions of the officers? Okay, if not, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something different? Councillor Crawford to move. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Cross to second. I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? Oh, sorry. My apologies. We should go ahead and do that. So, Councillor Crawford, would you like to speak to your motion? Councillor Gross, would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Bond.
I won't be supporting this because there's a couple of things I don't think we've got quite right here. One is I'm not satisfied that we've solved the issue of the loading bay. I think we should be able to condition something like that through this process. It's a loading bay where we have, 7 or 8 stairs, no matter which way you go, whether you go through the waste bins or through the what's meant to be a pedestrian area in order to carry your couches and fridge and things. It just doesn't work. People will wind up parking out the front and using the ramps up from the front. The second bit is I don't agree with the parking rates as recommended in this building. I think they should be, every 3-bedroom apartment should have at least 1 car parking spot. A car parking ratio of 0.5 in this area is just ridiculous. We want these apartments to be full of families, and families have cars. A 3-bedroom apartment without a car park will just become an Airbnb property or a student accommodation where they'll cram as many people as they can into every room. And that's not the sort of precinct we want to have here. We want families, and families require a car. So I'm not going to support this because it doesn't meet those requirements.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Voss.
Thank you, Chair. So I remember this when it came back in 2015 and, it has substantially changed and I would say also substantially improved. We've got significant diversity in the accommodation proposed now, and we also have 1 affordable housing unit, I think, which is great. Certainly not enough, but, great. I note that the Minister is a responsible authority for this, or has been, and it is going to VCAT. And I know that we're only able to consider the changes. I think the applicant is incredibly lucky here because the current framework is looking at an 8-storey maximum, and this is going to stick out quite significantly in the environment that's going on there. But there will be significant development there. I have concerns around the flooding and what that does look like, but that's to standard. I am worried about the car parking as well. I think what we've got currently is quite a blunt instrument, and I do think we need to be a little bit more sophisticated around the allocation rates, or however, that is the rules at the moment. So I'm also worried about the loading bay, and I'm hoping that the applicant will stay true to what they've said here today, and we'll get a better outcome. We've seen so much that's occurred with problematic loading bays or no loading bays, and just the repercussions that will happen. And we know that this will happen if we don't get it right in this particular area as well. So that's why we are so keen to make sure that loading happens on the site. I will support the application, but reluctantly.
Would any other councillors like to speak? Councillor Crawford, would you like to close?
I just want to say, This area particularly is part of those areas where we actually can't have people using cars. And as much as we have not got there in terms of behaviour change, this is the ideal area where we are encouraging families and people to live without cars. So I personally don't find the parking allocations problematic. I think it's exactly what we need to encourage behaviour change. And so if they're moving into an area where they know they actually don't have those facilities, that's the best way, rather than retrofitting of getting people to behaviour change with a close walk to the city, a tram or light rail right there. I think that this is the location where they build on top of railway stations and things like that, that we should not be encouraging people to have cars in this area. So although I am still worried about the loading bay, I think that this is an application in that regard worthy of support.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. I'll now put the officer's recommendation. All those in favour? All opposed? That motion is carried. All right. Well, thank you to the members of the public who came. We'll now move on to report item 6.2, Planning Permits Delegate Report. So I'll got myself out of order again. So I'll look for a mover for the officer's recommendation. Councillor Gross and Councillor Voss to second. Councillor Gross, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Voss, would anybody else like to speak to the motion? I'll go ahead and put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Fantastic. All right. Getting along. So item number 7, urgent business. Councillors, are there any items of urgent business? Doesn't look like it. There are no items of urgent business. Item 8, confidential matters. Councillors, we have no confidential items. So there being no further business, I declare the meeting closed.